Ahora le damos la palabra al doctor Andrew Minchener, gerente general de IEA Clean Coal Center, con la ponencia Carbón y Cambio Climático. El doctor Andrew es químico con maestría en estudios de combustión y explosión de la Universidad de Leeds. Cuenta con doctorado en sistemas de conversión del carbón y en estudios de energía y medio ambiente. Tiene más de 40 años de experiencia en utilización de combustibles fósiles y biomasa, consultoría energética y ambiental. Tuvo la oportunidad de trabajar en el Departamento de Energía y Cambio Climático del Reino Unido, el Banco Mundial, el Banco Asiático de Desarrollo y Naciones Unidas, entre otras. Recibimos al doctor Minchener con un cordial saludo. Bienvenido.
Andrew, you're live.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the IEA Clean Coal Center, it's a privilege to participate in this prestigious workshop, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity. This is what I'm going to run through, which is quite a lot, and there's quite a wide range of issues in my presentation. So a little bit about who we are, for those of you who don't know us, but about some information on the sustainability aspects of our work and its international dimension. Then talking about the role of coal and technology options as we move through these transitional periods and highlighting some of the challenges. And then I also want to spend a bit of time talking about international cooperation, because that's something else that we're particularly involved in. And I think there's a couple of interesting things there that your audience should find of benefit. So, who are we? Well, we are what is known as a technology collaboration program, and we are organized under the auspices of the International Energy Agency, but we are functionally and legally autonomous. That's nice to know. It gets that out of the way. More interestingly, we are funded by national governments and by corporate industrial organizations. They provide the funds that allow us to work, and they also help us very much in guiding the program that we undertake on their behalf and for the world in general. And we're dedicated to providing independent information and analysis on how coal can become a cleaner source of energy compatible with the Sustainable Development Goals. This slide shows the flags of our government-based members on the left-hand side, and you can see there's 7 of those. And on the right-hand side, we've got 5 corporate industrial organizations. Now, one thing I just want to highlight about this is that we have quite a lot of what I would call OECD representation amongst the governments, but I'm very proud to note that we have South Africa as a developing nation, which is also a full member. And then under the industrial partners, all 5 of those, in fact, are from developing countries, 2 from China, 1 from India, 1 from Russia, and then another from South Africa. This sets out a very brief overview of our program. That the core of our program is that we undertake policy relevant assessment studies covering peer-reviewed studies, fully referenced studies, which cover all aspects of coal production and preparation. And we cover through the full range of utilization processes, and that includes advanced coal power and conversion options. We focus very much on energy efficiency and environmental performance. And increasingly, we are now introducing work for coal transition issues, because that is perhaps a growing area of operations in the coal sector. Alongside that, I was about to say we have an extensive outreach activities, but perhaps I should say until COVID-19 started, we had extensive outreach activities. And unfortunately, those are on hold at the moment. But under normal conditions, we would run a big clean coal technology conference every 2 years. We run a whole range of single topic specialist workshops on advanced coal power systems, mercury emissions, environmental control systems, and so on. We have been providing input to various policy relevant R&D initiatives with the European Commission, and we do provide specialist support to the United Nations and other organizations initiatives. We also do support to organisations outside of our programme, but who have complementary initiatives. That includes the IEA Coal Industry Advisory Board, UN Environmental Programme, United States Department of State, and the European Commission's Research Fund for Coal and Steel. And we do that on a contract basis. Our reports are very well regarded, and that is why we think it's so important that we give them away for free, which is what we do, because it's important that people have access to our information. The only limitation is that you have to be a fee-paying member to get the reports immediately they're issued. Otherwise, anyone can get them after they've been issued for 6 months. And I'll come back to how you can get access to those a little bit later. I said about sustainability, and I think this is an important issue. We look to work closely within for our operating framework. We want to identify and publicise the best practice in every aspect of the coal production, transport, processing and utilisation chain. That's within the rationale for balancing security of supply, affordability and environmental issues. And within that, we consider policy and regulatory issues, financial resourcing, market issues, technology development and deployment, and that includes efficiency improvements, lowering greenhouse and non-greenhouse gas emissions, reducing coal water stress, ensuring poverty alleviation through universal access to robust, reliable electricity, and indeed the social license to operate. These goals are relatively short term within the UN. I think the target date is 2030 or thereabouts. And so it's interesting to compare this with the nearer term framework that many organisations, particularly developing countries, are working within, as opposed to the rather longer term, but perhaps more high profile climate change initiatives that are ongoing. This slide is the basis for every rational energy strategy world. It's a representation of the energy trilemma, which if you are a government setting an energy policy, I would suggest that you're looking to ensure that you can balance the inputs and outputs relating to those three subjects there. And I would respectfully suggest that security of energy supply is the most important. But of course, the energy has to be affordable, so energy costs are important. And dealing with the environmental issues associated with your energy uses is important. And alongside that, we've now included climate protection because of the Paris Agreement and so on. The important thing to note about this is all of those topics are important, none of which can be neglected. So you can't optimize on one at the expense of the other. So in fact, what this is showing you that any rational policy requires and represents an energy compromise, and it's not sustainable to focus on one aspect without consideration of the others. I have a couple of statements like this, which I actually think are very, very important. It's very important that we all remember that the world is a heterogeneous place. And what that means is that in different regions, they have different energy options. The regions are at various stages of industrial development. And in that regard, it's not surprising that they have different priorities for ensuring a sustainable future. And when you put alongside that, when you think about countering climate change, there is no one-size-fits-all solution to countering climate change. What might work for a developing country is fine, but that would not necessarily work particularly well in an OECD country and vice versa. In particular, the point to stress, I think, is that developing nations do have different priorities to the OECD countries in terms of the energy and environmental priorities. So let's move on to what is happening with coal. Coal has obviously been used around and used for a long, long time. And what this graph is showing is the linkage between efficiency of the coal-based power process and the environmental consequences in terms of the carbon dioxide emissions. A typical standard plant is what we call a subcritical coal plant, and that has relatively modest steam temperatures and pressures, temperatures perhaps 540 centigrade. Since then, there's been development work taking forward the improvement on the steam conditions, and we've gone through what they call supercritical to ultra supercritical systems, and they essentially have steam temperatures of about 600 to 620 with proportionally higher steam pressures than we had in the subcritical systems. And as I show on the right of this slide, there are various advanced versions of that going to ever higher temperatures and pressures and other approaches to push the efficiencies still further. Those efficiency improvements have taken place over perhaps 15 or so years, which is pretty amazing in terms of how much advanced there has been, and it's a tribute to the organizations that work on it. But you can see there's a very, as you go towards these higher efficiencies, there's a very significant drop in the carbon emissions per unit of output. Let's focus on the ultra supercriticals. They are currently the most modern coal-fired plants. And this slide shows the distribution of those plants against various regions of the world. And you can see at present, I think it'll be for a long time so, the majority of the plants that either are in operation or under construction are in Asia, which is perhaps not surprising because over 50% of the world's population is based in Asia, and there's an ever-growing demand for more energy to meet even basic standards of living in many of those countries. The next largest area is Europe, but as we will talk about in a little while, those plants they're not taking those plants any further because their policy for the future doesn't especially involve coal. Excuse me. Then in the Middle East, there's a number of plants operating and more to come. And even now we're starting to see these modern plants appearing in Africa. With that in mind, I want to say a few words about carbon capture and storage, as I think it has a particularly important role for a sustainable energy future. Essentially what we're talking about here is including various techniques on the exhaust end of a coal-fired plant that can remove the carbon dioxide from the gas stream. It takes it into a solution, amine solution, and removes the carbon dioxide. And that CO2 can then either be transported and stored in a geological formation, just so, or it can, very much in the near term at least, be used for enhanced oil recovery by being pumped into a depleted oil well, which helps to raise the pressure and improves the extraction rates of oil from these particular wells. We think CCS adds value to all power systems, and it's actually uniquely valuable when deployed alongside intermittent renewables. This slide is taken from a piece of modelling work that we've been involved with, and we're actually supporting further work at Imperial College. And what it's trying to show you, or does show you, is that CCS can provide a strong positive financial benefit in all of the net zero scenarios that are being investigated. You'll probably be aware that as you increase the amount of renewables on the grid system, if they're variable renewable energy sources such as solar and wind, these are intermittent, then unreliable because the sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow, and it's also usually unpredictable. And so what you need to ensure that the grid is stable is the addition of what we call dispatchable power, which can be provided by coal or gas or even biomass-fired power plants. And what we're showing here is the total system costs in blue for that situation where you've got CCS, gas, coal, nuclear, a whole range of technologies for 6 different regions: the UK, Poland, part of Australia, part of Indonesia, and 2 locations in the USA. But if you incorporate CCS on the coal-fired plants, not only are you getting the benefit of the coal-fired plants providing dispatchable energy that can balance the system, with CCS it means that the whole system is a very low carbon emitter, which is ultimately really where we want to be. And though people talk about renewables being very low cost, and that's on a levelized cost of electricity basis, as you increase the amount of renewables on the grid, what you find is that it becomes much more difficult to control the system. But equally, as you push more and more renewables on to achieve a certain capacity level, the costs rise pretty much exponentially. So it becomes a very expensive technology. When you combine it with CCS, at least you can contain the costs, and you can, because you're getting benefit from the coal with CCS as well as the renewables. And you can get the blue line, which shows comparatively low overall system cost. When you operate perhaps just with renewables and storage, which is the grey area, you can see that the costs rise considerably. And you also have a situation where you quite often cannot meet all your total load requirements just from a system that's got renewables and maybe some battery storage. So we think deploying CCS in this situation is a least cost transition. I'm not saying it's cheap, it's a least cost transition to a net zero emissions electricity grid, which is the driver towards a broader decarbonisation agenda. Having talked about where coal is now still going to, as I said, the European Union is adopting a different approach. They, irrespective of CCS or anything else, they are going to remove coal from their energy mix. So they don't really see a role for coal, and they see their future as a coal-free future. And that is they at the moment see power generation being based on variable renewable energy with battery storage. So in view of what I've just said, I think we certainly have some concerns of what level of renewables they can actually get on those grid systems without major problems, especially if they're not going to include CCS. The important thing I think also to mention within this, they have a just transition from coal to other forms of energy, but that means they're also taking it very seriously at looking at what they can do to remediate the coal mines when they are no longer operational, and how they might repurpose the power plants for other use and other opportunities. So I think all that overall comprehensive sustainable approach is important to recognise. Let's move on. Coal, we always think of coal as a fuel. You burn it basically, or you gasify it and then burn the gas. But there are increasingly interests in looking at non-power uses of coal. Now, coal can be upgraded and transformed to provide high-value chemicals and future fuels. But it can also be used as a raw material in the production of a wide range of high added value products. For example, in this picture, you can see on the right-hand side the trucks taking low-grade coal to a power station. But instead, if they take it to a factory or process unit, you can convert that coal into very high-value graphene. And you can also extract rare earth elements from the coal or from its ash. You can make carbon fibers. You can make nanomaterials. I'll just highlight rare earth elements. They appear in everything pretty well. They're in your mobile phone. They're in any digital control system you have or impacts on your life. But the key word there is rare. There's not much of them about, but there seems to be quite a lot of them about in coal. So that's something that's being explored. There's about 100,000 tons of coal a year already being used on these sorts of processes. And there's quite extensive programs looking to develop the process, but also looking at other ways of extracting these elements from the coal. Equally, coal fly ash in the past was looked on as a waste. It's now an internationally traded product. You can transform coal fly ash into it can be used in construction, but there are alternative uses which are emerging, such as mineral oil sources. It can be used for catalysis processes, for water purification systems, making of new advanced materials, and it can be used in agriculture. You can get the humic acid components of coal, mixing them with some form of manure, and it can be used as a very effective fertilizer on the fields. Earlier on, I said a bit about capacity building for knowledge transfer as part of our work. And the organisations that I mentioned at the time included the Coal Industry Advisory Board, but the ones listed here are the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, the United Nations Environmental Programme, the US Department of State, and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, who we're just getting started with. I'll say a little bit about the UNECE work. I've been very pleased that I've been voted as a designate vice chair of their bureau for the UNECE group of experts on cleaner electricity systems. That involves providing technology briefs on aspects of power-based integration of coal with renewables, looking at better flexibility in coal power systems, and improving to very high levels of environmental performance. I'm also a member of their task force that's seeking to establish a framework for carbon neutrality in the UNECE region by 2050, which is, means I'm living in interesting times with that last one. Just another word on communication. This is a reflection of our website, which you can get access to. It's a portal for all of our resources. For example, we run a monthly webinar. All of our webinars are stored there on our YouTube channel, goes back several years, and we're seeing increasing interest from our stakeholders. We have blogs, personal blogs. I write a lot of those, so do all of the staff, and they offer a more personal perspective as well as expert opinion, and are some of our most popular content. We're also getting involved and engaged on Twitter and LinkedIn, so I'm sure we can link through to you on those media bases as well. So please do connect with us. We'd be very pleased to interact with you and be very happy that we can answer any questions that you might have. In words of communication, I just want to finally introduce one more initiative that we are very proud of, and that's the IEA Clean Coal Centre's Knowledge Partners Network. The idea behind this is to show global solidarity between organisations that have a positive interest in sustainable coal utilisation. And we want to showcase the breadth of everyone's global knowledge, our global knowledge partners, their breadth, to ensure better exchange of information and encourage future collaboration. We sort of got this running around about February of this year and started sending out invitations to organisations that we knew. And we're delighted that we've already got a very positive and growing response from industrial companies, from universities and other organisations to become part of this network. Now, by the end of August, we had 82 signed up partners, and they came from 21 countries. We've got further invitations and requests being processed. Should you go to our website, you can see the logos of all these members on that website. And we'd like to see some of your audience joining us in this. We'd very much like to help you do that. These are the countries, 21 countries. And again, with my feeding and focus on developing nations, well, I'm very pleased that we have 8 developing nations included there, which is Brazil, China, India, Indonesia, Mongolia, Russia, South Africa, and Turkey. In terms of early steps for sharing our knowledge, if we can get everyone who registers on our website as a knowledge partner will access our reports clearly, because anyone can get that. They can also sign up for our weekly newsletter, and we will be able to improve their awareness of who is doing what on sustainable coal issues. We're going to, by encouraging our members to share press releases and event announcements, we can pass on again. We can connect members together with similar interests, and we can alert the members to our responses on sustainable coal discussions. I'm probably running out of time. So where do we go from here? I think the point I just really want to emphasize again, the world is heterogeneous. We have OECD countries, relatively wealthy countries, and we have developing nations at all sorts of levels of development. And I think so it's very clear that there's no one-size-fits-all approach for climate change mitigation, or indeed for development. So I think a range of solutions will be needed to be viable. And indeed, it's not surprising that those chosen in OECD countries will not necessarily be of value for developing countries. But I think it's also important for the OECD countries who are pushing the climate agenda at present, that without a proper engagement with developing countries, all the other efforts risk being irrelevant. There are various policies we'd like to see. Obsolete coal power technologies could be at very least replaced with modern high efficiency, low emissions options. And as soon as possible, CCS or carbon capture, utilization and storage technologies can be included to make those coal systems very low carbon emitters. And I also think there's a need to shape the transition dialogue to include all energy sources, including coal, while devising a pragmatic and effective pathway towards a 1.5 degree centigrade scenario. So I hope you found this of interest. Please contact me at the email address that's shown here if I can be of further help. And if you would like further info, I'll be very happy to introduce you to my other staff, and we'd be happy to interact with you, look at options for cooperation. I trust that the organisations will provide my presentation to all of you who wish it. And please note in that presentation, I've included quite a few additional slides, which I trust will also be of interest. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll be happy to take any questions. Thank you.